Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on AI dash cams and biometric data privacy. My name is Brian Jones, and I am a product specialist here for Netradyne. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Matt Hart. He is Executive Director of the Illinois Trucking Association as we kick off our discussion. Matt.
Always helps if you unmute. Thank you, Brian, so much, and thank you to everybody for jumping on today. Dash cameras, biometric information, BIPA, that is the latest hot topic in Illinois. And we are hearing from our members. As your lead lobbyist, I can tell you we are fighting to improve the biometric law framework that we have in Illinois because it's not good, and it needs to be fixed. And we brought on a Netradyne and two great speakers who are going to tell you about how to make sure that you don't get caught in this web that we currently have until we can fix this legislatively. And I promise you, you've got our commitment at the Illinois Trucking Association. This is a tier 1 issue for us. And in fact, I will give just one quick report. I'm actually meeting with state senators right now, and we've got a key meeting next week as well that hopefully will get us some relief when it comes to the Biometric Information Privacy Act in Illinois. We know our members are facing these frivolous lawsuits, and we know it's a problem. And so when Netradyne reached out to us and said, can we help educate folks at the Illinois Trucking Association, we said absolutely. So we've got two really smart people on here today who know way more than I do about the laws, but they're going to tell you about a little bit about Illinois' law as well as other BIPA laws that are out there, because there are other BIPA laws as well, and how to protect yourself and protect your trucking company, because we know especially these cameras are a great safety tool, and we don't want our biometric legal framework preventing us from keeping our highways and our drivers as safe as possible. So I'm really pleased today to introduce Christy Griffith and Michael Campos from Netradyne. Michael, I want to thank you that you got the memo about the plaid shirt. Christy, I guess you didn't get the memo. We were all supposed to have plaid shirts on, but no, all kidding aside, to all of our IT members, you're in for a real treat with Michael and with Christy, and they've got a great presentation. And so I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed folks from Netradyne. And Michael and Christy, thank you guys so much for being on with us.
Thanks for having us so much. So let me introduce Michael. Is our VP of Privacy and IP. So he is a double threat. He knows a lot about how our system works, and he's an expert on privacy. And I'm the general counsel here, general counsel commercial here at Netradyne, and we're here to try and help you guys out, help you navigate the crazy world that is BIPA right now. So we're going to talk about AI dash cams and biometric data privacy laws. Next slide. So just as an overview, we'll talk a little bit about AI dash cams and what they are. We'll give you a biometric data privacy law kind of overview, particularly in Illinois, and give you some tips on what, how to think about this. And then finally, just some best practices with regard to something called privacy by design. Next slide. So let's talk about AI dash cams. So in our original world of trucking and fleet safety and all of that, we started with dash cams. And that's on that far left side, you'll see driver safety and exoneration. That's what a dash cam will help provide, right? It can demonstrate what happened after an accident. So what AI dash cams do, instead of being reactive, they're proactive. They will help you prevent accidents and improve road safety by sort of helping you coach your drivers and figure out what's going on in the road. And as a third step, as a little nod to Netradyne, which is our company, we actually do provide positive recognition to sort of incent drivers to drive well. So that's sort of the world in which we live in. AI comes in at after just exoneration. We provide the proactive step. Next slide. So Michael's going to go into sort of a deep dive on a bunch of this stuff, but one thing just to set everyone's sort of understanding of where we are, there's a difference between in-cab safety features, which is what I talked about on the prior slide, which is safe driving. So those are this distracted driving, seat belt, is a driver wearing a seat belt, is a driver getting drowsy. those are in-cab safety events, right? And that's what the AI is intended for. On the other side, to the right in what you're seeing, it's something called visual login. That's the term that we use at Netradyne. Other systems have other names for it. That's a completely different system where it's intended to identify a specific driver to a driving event, right? So you can have different ways to attach information, but the visual login system actually uses your face to figure out who that person is. That's predominantly that's sort of an added feature, but in-cab safety features is what we're talking about below, which is safe driving technology. And that's where most of the AI is. It's an in-cab safety.
Okay, and then, yeah, well, before we move on from this slide, I'll just point out one other detail, which is that for many of the in-cab safety features, there's this little box on the top left there where, you know, the device can provide real-time feedback to the driver. So if the driver's distracted, it can kind of just provide like a beep or a little verbal message to get the person to be less distracted. And then when you're kind of using this as to build a whole, you know, promote a whole culture of safety, then what you want to do is, you know, identify all the moments of good and bad driving and kind of find statistics and be able to coach drivers or let the drivers coach themselves. And in order to do that, you need to do more than just kind of that real-time feedback. You also want to kind of keep track of what's been going on and how things are improving statistics-wise. And that's another reason why you need some kind of visual login or some kind of login, so you can associate who was driving at the time that these different events were detected. So I just want to add that point. Then go to the next slide, please. So how AI dash cams work in a fleet. So in a fleet, typically, unlike your personal car, many different drivers may drive different vehicles on different days, and that's a very common scenario for our customers. So it's important there's not a one-to-one mapping between the driver and a vehicle. So the vehicle and the device in the vehicle is going to be collecting that driving data on the bottom there. That's like inertial data, which is the basis of those triggers and knowing that you're in an accident, but also geolocation data, outward camera and inward camera data, and then the on-device safety events that it's detecting, like that they're distracted or that they ran a red light or something like that. So that data is being processed and by the device itself, and then the fleet provides us with driver user logins, and then there's maybe an ELD way that we integrate with, so that we know who's driving at a particular time. And then with those two pieces of information, we can combine the data in the cloud, and then we can present it back to the correct driver in the app, or we can have it nicely organized for a safety manager in our web portal. And then, so what I'm showing here again is just to reiterate the point that Christy made on the very bottom is there's this analysis that goes on the device to see about the orientation of the head and what are they holding and where are they looking. And those are the safety features that go into the kind of analysis. And then there's also this, what we call visual login, that can also be done based on processing from the device itself. So instead of an ELD or in conjunction with an ELD, you can have that visual login type of functionality that associates the correct driver to the driving data. So that's how AI dash cams work in a fleet at a very high level. So next slide. Okay, so now we'll dive deeply into the biometrics laws. So there are, in the US, there are 3 states that have specific biometrics laws that specifically target biometric data. Illinois, Texas, and Washington. And there's other states that are maybe going to have one soon, and this is the current state of affairs. The Illinois law, so there's only 3, but Illinois is even extra special among those because Illinois has the BIPA is the acronym used to describe the actual statute. It is a private right of action, meaning that individuals can bring an action in court, and on top of it, there's statutory damages, so there's a certain amount of money that they will receive per offense, and it's all spelled out, and that lends itself really well to having class action lawsuits, and there is a kind of a large industry in Illinois around filing these class action lawsuits. And starting in late 2021, early 2022, trucking fleets became a target. So this is a headline from January 2022. Truck drivers must be informed of biometric scans in Illinois. And there are cases with some of our competitors that are still ongoing. And yeah, the high level thing to know is that this BIPA law, this biometrics law in Illinois, is now affecting the trucking industry. And significantly, there are, I guess I didn't mention it here, but there are very large settlements.
And just to clarify, so the other states there are other states that have biometric laws, but unlike Illinois, they're enforced by the Attorney General of each state. So in order for someone, an individual doesn't generally get money. They can just complain, and the Attorney General can fine a fleet or a provider. But Illinois is the only state that allows, incentivizes drivers and plaintiffs' attorneys to seek compensation themselves.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so now because Illinois is so special, we're talking at the Illinois Trucking Association, we're going to do a deep dive into what this law is. So BIPA stands for Biometric Information Privacy Act, and there are two important definitions. People usually say biometrics, but under BIPA, you actually are talking about two different things. You're talking about a biometric identifier and then biometric information. And so this is from the statute itself. A biometric identifier means, and kind of going left to right here with these icons, it means a retina or iris scan, your retina, fingerprint, and then these other things which are newer, but a voice print or a scan of hand or face geometry. So hopefully your whole hand on something, or the scan of the face geometry is really what's the thing at issue here when you're talking about AI dash cams. That's a biometric identifier. These are things that can be used to uniquely identify an individual. And they tend to be, there are all things that would be very difficult for a person to change, unlike the next slide we'll get into. But here, and then I'll add the biometric information, that's the second thing, means any information based on the individual's biometric identifier used to identify an individual. So if you're deriving something from a fingerprint so that you can then use that data later to that second type of data to identify an individual, that's covered too. So they thought that through. They said there's this group of things, part A, biometric identifiers, those are covered. Things that are derived from that that can still be used to identify an individual, that's part B, those are also covered. All right, so the next slide. So what are not biometrics? So they added definitions of what they had limited the scope back in 2008. So biometric identifiers do not include, and then here I'm going to go left to right again. These are all things they're interesting in because they actually could be used to identify people, and they frequently are in regular, commerce, or when you're phoning in a report to the police or something. And how do you authenticate contracts and things? But they do not include writing samples, written signatures, photographs, demographic data, I don't have an icon for that, but tattoo descriptions, and then physical descriptions such as height, weight, hair color, or eye color. Okay, so these, it's not worth going into too much detail about how are these all combined, but for the purposes of, or how are these related to each other, but for the purposes of AI dash cams, it's very important to note that biometric identifiers do not include photographs. And then in addition, biometric information does not include information derived from items or procedures excluded under the definition of biometric identifiers. So it's kind of like before, if this group of things A, those are all biometric identifiers, things derived from that are still used to identify you. B, those are still included. And then here, now we're saying, well, there's this other group C, and these are not biometric identifiers. Things that are derived from that, also not biometric information. Doesn't fall under the scope of the law. So those were the helpful hints that were provided back in 2008. Next slide. So where are the biometrics in an AI dash cam system under the Illinois lawsuit? Illinois BIPA statute. Sorry, the statute. And so I said, scan of face geometry is probably the thing that's the most important here. And again, a biometric identifier means, among other things, a scan of face geometry. So this is meant on the left here, meant to be my actual face, not a picture of my face, but my face has a three-dimensional nature to it. And then these are drones that have this LiDAR capability. And if the drone were to kind of scan my whole face and come up with like a three-dimensional representation of my face, it seems like that's the kind of thing that they were thinking about. That's what a scan of a face geometry is. It's the result of that kind of scanning and processing. That's a biometric identifier. That would be a biometric identifier under the Illinois statute. There is no LiDAR within AI dashcam systems currently, and certainly not, I don't expect there to be for the face ever. But that would be, just to kind of set the stage, that would be a scan of a face geometry. All right, next slide. So AI dashcams work because they capture photographs and then they process those photographs. So we know from the statute the biometric identifiers do not include photographs. So there's a bunch of photographs that are being recorded. All of these things are not biometric identifiers. All right, next slide. And then information that is derived from photographs, we know that according to the statute, the definition, they are not biometric information. So we have biometric identifier on the left, biometric information on the right. We've gone from something that's not, the thing derived from it is not the biometric information. So anything derived from photographs is not biometric information. So that kind of leaves you with the question, well, where? So, I mean, the AI dashcam is kind of primarily a vision-based processing system. So photographs are excluded, things derived from photographs are excluded. So why are we even talking about this? So the next slide. So the question is, how can BIPA, this Illinois law, apply to an AI dash camera? Because that's what we're talking about. And so here I'll reference this case against Shutterfly, where this is part of the opinion, where the case is called Monroe versus Shutterfly, and Shutterfly was tagging images in their system. They had a lot of photographs of people stored on their servers, and they could kind of extract information from these pictures and knowing who they are, and then go apply it to other pictures and tag those people in other pictures. So what they said in that case is kind of what I just laid out to you just now. It is clear that the data extracted from Monroe's, that's kind of the plaintiff here, the data extracted from Monroe's photograph cannot constitute biometric information. That's part 2. It cannot, within the meaning of the statute. And why not? Because photographs are expressly excluded from the definition of biometric identifier, so that's part A, and the definition of biometric information expressly excludes the things derived from that. So that's what I just told you. It is clear that this processing cannot constitute biometric information. So again, where is it? So then the next slide.
One would think.
Yeah, well, one would think, and that it would be clear. And interestingly, in the same opinion, the judge, I guess, and this is a frequently quoted line, that this reading of the statute seems sensible enough at first blush. So it's like a sensible reading of a law, should be kind of, that the law is supposed to be sensibly read and everything. But so it seems sensible enough at first blush, and then comma, but it begins to unravel under scrutiny. And then he references this Google and Facebook, at the time it was called Facebook, have asserted the same argument in seeking dismissal of suits against them under BIPA. And in both cases, the argument has been rejected at the dismissal stage. And actually, interestingly, these things don't actually go to trial and get settled once and for all. I mean, they get settled. Sorry, they get settled without actually establishing where the line should be. So it seems sensible enough at first blush, but it begins to unravel under scrutiny. And so without going into too many more details about that particular case, let's go to the next slide. What they were kind of saying, a good way to think about the principle there is this one. So here, what constitutes a scan of face geometry? So on the left, again, this is an actual three-dimensional face. And you might say a three-dimensional face, that's like a face geometry, right? And so if I take a picture of a three-dimensional face, aren't I taking a scan? Am I somehow scanning a face geometry? I mean, the juror might think, yeah, you are kind of scanning a face geometry. Like, I've got a three-dimensional face, you're kind of scanning it with a camera. But the thing is, it doesn't matter. A scan, a photograph, is not a biometric identifier. So, and a biometric identifier includes a face geometry. So a photograph cannot be a scan of a face geometry. So the mere act of taking a photograph of a three-dimensional face and having a photograph, that does not constitute a scan of face geometry under the Illinois statute. That's a very important point. And then the data that can be used, even regardless of what you do with that data, if you're deriving data from the picture, even if you're, I'll kind of go into these next little bubbles here in a second, well, we have a system, our visual login system actually uses images to identify a person, and then you can identify the person as the correct driver. That is not biometric information. That's not part B, that's not step 2, because it comes from step thing A that was excluded. But ultimately the logic that they got to was that it's not biometric information, but it's actually a biometric identifier itself. So the processing, it becomes a part A. So the camera, collection of photographs, and then some kind of processing that yields like something that can then be used to identify a person later. Whatever that something is that you've created itself is now the scan of a face geometry, or it acts like that. So here we have this, actually the Netradyne logo kind of tilted on its side, and it's meant to look like a neural network. So here the neural network, and this is roughly how it works. So you've got an image that comes in, there's several drivers that are in the fleet, so it could be one of these drivers of the fleet, and the neural network has been trained to figure out which of those drivers was it, and then it figures out it's this guy, and then it says, so the person who was sitting in the vehicle at that time is Michael Campos, that's me. And so there's something about that neural network and the training that's capable of identifying the person that in there's something that we need to treat like a scan of face geometry. Okay, this is the deepest, well, we're gonna go a couple more slides. So next slide. So back into this, where are the biometrics? So on the top row here, if you were to take a 3D LiDAR, and reconstruct my face, you would directly get to a scan of a face geometry. But then beneath that, if you were to take photographs of me over different days, this happens to be from the same day, and then train an AI to identify me, or authenticate me is the word we like to use because it's authenticating versus other drivers in the fleet. It's very limited. There's all sorts of protections placed on this model here. But if you were to do that, you would be creating a biometric identifier again. So when you get to this column now, you're at the point where you've got things that can be used to identify, and you know that because in fact we do use it to identify the person. That's the point of visual login. So here, then this is where I wanted to make the point about the photographs. So photographs are clearly excluded under the statute. But because it literally says that they are not biometric identifiers. And then, so these systems, like our system does this visual login pipeline, right, which is also off by default. It's disabled by default. You have to enable it. And you have to get consents to enable it, and we'll get to that in the end. But the system separately will capture photographs, and it will process those photographs on the device, and then it will make inferences about those photographs. So in this case, here I am wearing my seatbelt, but I'm distracted. I happen to be eating. So the system on the device, there's an AI there, and it's tracking the orientation of the head and also the orientation of my arms, and if there's something in my hand, it might try to figure out what's in my hand to see if it's a phone actually. And then and here I was eating something, but I was still looking away from the road for a few seconds, and it made an inference that I was distracted. Now all that processing happens on the device, and the only thing that comes out is the inference that I was distracted. And that inference, and there's a little bit of supporting information about like where was my head at the time to make that inference, but that inference itself is something that cannot be used to identify. There's this, when the inference cannot be used to identify, there's this other kind of case law that says, well, that probably, and with other details, that takes it out of BIPA. But here's the kicker, is that we have competitors who don't offer this like kind of middle row here. They don't offer a process that lets you identify the driver based on the images. You just can't even do it. So they're kind of, I'm not sure exactly how they're thinking about it, but they don't have that. They just have the kind of distracted driving and similar features. And the lawsuit, there are BIPA lawsuits against them and some of their customers, and they haven't been able to shake it yet. So they're just having this distraction feature seems to be enough at least at the current stage, like the lawsuits are going forward. You're not able to kind of, or they haven't been able to get them dismissed at an early stage, even though they've argued that they're not using this information to identify the driver. Oh, sorry, next slide. All right, so just to summarize that part, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Christy. We have this kind of complicated, that last slide was very complicated, but the bottom line is on the left side, so biometrics and dash cameras, where are they? On the left side, you've got photographs, clearly not biometric under the Illinois statute. On the very right side, we don't even write it there, there's like a face geometry, some abstract thing that's not very well defined. That is clearly under the biometric, the BIPA statute. And then the visual login is potentially biometric. It seems to have a lot of the, it's Chris is going to talk about it, but it's like worth thinking about it as if that's going to fall under BIPA. And then the part that's the big question mark right now is that this distracted driving, it really shouldn't fit within it's not what the intention was, but the lawsuits are going forward. So that's the state of the law and the statute and kind of where the question is. Then next slide, and hand it over to Christy.
Yeah, so here we are. What should you do? It's a tough one. As an attorney, I'll tell you, it's a really tough one, because I would go with plain meaning of the law, and we're in this kind of murky situation where judges are kind of allowing suits to go forward that seemingly on their face don't make a lot of sense. So if you look at the slide that Michael had pulled up, this is basically it. On the far left, you just have pure photograph, right? A photograph of an individual, you're safe. It's expressly excluded from the law just as a photograph. And on the far right, where you're using face geometries to identify an individual, you are squarely under the law, right? But AI dash cams generally fall somewhere in between those two endpoints. So on the visual login side, we would argue that the safest bet is to assume that you would fall under BIPA, meaning you're using, although they are derived from photographs, there's processing, as Michael explained, that happens that somehow creates something that becomes a biometric identifier. And as such, you'd probably fall under, very likely, you might fall under the BIPA lawsuit if you're utilizing something like the visual login system for assigning drive times. The big question is the second green dot, which is the in-cab safety features, which is the heart of any AI dash cam, right? It's preventing, it's a service to prevent accidents. And so what we would say is that consent will help you prevent a lawsuit. Ultimately, if you ask my feeling, because there is no identification going on, it's not, the system is not capable of identifying a person. It seems like there's no way that could ultimately be a winning lawsuit. But the bottom line is, if you're trying to avoid a lawsuit in the first place, then what we would say, in sort of the American sense of the word consent, is to obtain consent from your drivers. Next slide. And what I would argue is that it's not that hard, actually. I mean, in terms of what you need in the consent, it's not hard. I understand I'm not trying to be flip, because it's hard to get consents and from your drivers. But under BIPA, for something like, under BIPA, all you need to do, there's three basic things you need to comply with. You need to inform the subject in writing of the purpose for which you're collecting certain information. Second, you need to have a written policy at your company that says, hey, this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to do it, including we'll only retain it for a certain amount of time. And then you need the subject to sign off and say, yes, I understand and I agree, right? So it's basically three components that you need. Next slide. How that applies to BLS, for example, our BLS system is we state, we tell our customers to state that you're utilizing the system that is intended to authenticate you based on an image of your face. It's not a facial geometry or anything like that, but it is based on an image of your face. And it's retained for a certain amount of time in accordance with the Netradyne policies. And you as one of our employees understand and agree to this. So that's the basic the 3 things you need to do to use. This is what we require our customers to use in order to utilize the VLS system. Next slide. It gets a little trickier when we're talking about in-cab safety features because we don't think, at its heart, it's not legally required because there's no facial geometry, there's no identification going on. Having said that, those lawsuits, particularly against our competitors, are going forward. And because they're going forward, the safest thing to do is to basically provide notice and a waiver. So basically, it just says you tell your drivers, hey, we have these cameras, and it looks at sort of the orientation of your head, whether you're wearing a seatbelt, and there are certain inferences derived from the videos. And here's more information about how Netradyne uses that information, or your provider, and you acknowledge that this is going on. And if you get this, we're pretty confident, I mean, that you will be protected. Generally, if you provide notice and somebody signs off, yes, I've read this notice, you're well protected under all the privacy statutes. Next slide. So going back, if you look at the same idea, basically we consider on the right side, you really need to get consent, or you will almost likely be embroiled in something. On the left side, strongly recommend, right? For your even in-cab safety features, it's just a best practice. You eventually, ultimately, I think those suits, the defense of those suits would prevail. It doesn't fall under statute, but the plaintiff's bar is quite strong in Illinois, as all of you are aware, and so as a best practice, that would be what we would suggest to prevent a lawsuit. Next slide. To protect lawsuits, as I was saying, we follow something called privacy by design, which is Michael's specialty, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, right. So, everything that Christy said, and I think also what Matt mentioned at the beginning, where he's the head lobbyist for the ITA. So there is an interest in kind of making more sense out of the Illinois law, but also to contextualize this, the Illinois law is from 2008. It's this kind of early U.S. privacy law, and it's one that's gotten a lot of attention because of those factors that it kind of creates the class action lawsuits and the private right of action. But that's just one state in the United States, but privacy law is a kind of a global trend. So all the countries here that we're seeing in blue are ones that have a comprehensive data protection or privacy law as of 2023. And as you can see, America is kind of like one of the outliers, but especially Canada's for a long time had a comprehensive privacy law. Europe for sure, as a lot of people in the space know about the European privacy laws. But all these other countries do too. So there's kind of like a global trend to have like regulation of privacy, and the U.S. has not yet had a comprehensive kind of federal level privacy law that applies, comprehensive meaning that applies to all privacy in all aspects, and not just sort of healthcare or finance. So there's like a kind of a lot of other outside influences in terms of like how these terms are even interpreted, like what these terms that are left undefined in the Illinois law, like possession or consent and things like that. So they have different meanings in different jurisdictions, and they all influence what's going on. But it's a trend that everyone should be aware of. And then the next slide, please. And then in the U.S., there are states that have these comprehensive privacy laws. California is maybe one of it's kind of like one of the leading states. And then 2023 was the year that a lot of other states, including in California, updated their comprehensive privacy law, and other states added theirs as well. There were 5 for a long time. Now there's all these extras, all these additional ones. So there's many states are filling the gap. They're creating these comprehensive privacy laws, which have to do with what we were with like the key requirements, where key requirements are you be transparent, you provide notice to the data subjects, you tell them about some of your basic security measures, like including your data retention policies. So those are features of comprehensive privacy laws, and there are several of them in now different states. They're not always, so these are comprehensive, so they're not just, Illinois is specific to a particular sensitive data type called biometric data, and there's got its peculiarities about how it defines it. But so sensitive data types usually find their place in these other comprehensive laws, but also just general personal information, like an email address isn't really sensitive, but so they, there's allowances for that. So biometrics would be included in some of these state laws as well. So you have to, so it's nice, so it's very difficult, I guess these last 2 slides show that it's very difficult to stay on top of not just Illinois, but all of the activity outside of the US that's influencing the US, and also within the US, all these different states who are developing their own laws, and they're kind of slightly different from each other. So how do you even deal with that complexity? We're not going to go into all of it, but we'll tell you a good approach in the next slide. So early on, we decided to take on this privacy by design framework, and it's something that actually originated in Canada, and it was a great thing for us early on in the company, where the 7 principles of privacy by design here are listed on the right. I won't go through all of them, but it's kind of like you should be proactive, you should respect user privacy, you should be transparent, embed privacy features into design. So we worked with KPMG as a consultant, and then this other entity actually granted us a certification for privacy by design. So some of the privacy program highlights, and this is just meant to show that these are things to think about and be aware of when you're figuring out who you should work with and kind of ask certain questions. So Netradyne has voluntarily chosen not to sell any personal data. That's also an earlier policy we adopted. That when you do sell personal data, that creates all sorts of other privacy issues, and certainly selling biometric data would create a lot of privacy issues. So we just don't sell personal data. We have internal privacy experts, and we have company-wide governance, and you're looking at these 2 of the leaders there on that for our company. Our team participates in product design. It monitors all this changing landscape of privacy laws. We conduct our own breach exercises to make sure that the data is secure, and we provide a lot of resources to address customer questions. So at the end, we'll say, if you have questions, you can contact us, and that's part of what we do here. And then just a few highlights. We've launched in the United Kingdom, and we've met all the UK and EU GDPR compliance guidelines, which are pretty strict and very difficult. We had our privacy by design certification around that time. We also have our commercial launch in Canada, which has happened this year. And also importantly, successful engagements with large driver-centric privacy-focused fleets. It's really interesting to me, this is a trend where the larger the fleet, the more interested in addressing privacy issues they are. And it's kind of a mix. It's a mixture of wanting to make sure that the drivers feel heard and that we're doing the right thing for the drivers, and also because the liability increases with the size of your company. So it's a bigger deal to bigger companies. And we've dealt with some of the very big companies that have these questions and issues and concerns, and so something that we're proud to say that they've chosen to work with us. Okay, so next slide. Yeah, privacy is embedded in the design. So this is, again, kind of, I'm trying not to make this into a pitch for Netradyne, but just some features to think about when you're evaluating AI dashcam solutions. One is, so we have this AI and edge computing that's becoming more standard, although it's not everywhere, but the device itself is making all these inferences about distracted driving or wearing a seatbelt. It's not being sent to the cloud and having a person read it. So because of that, it's kind of edge computing. Over 99% of the video, or approximately 99% of the video, I should say, never leaves the device. We monitor that number. The video only leaves the device when something happens, and also subject to other constraints. That is a huge privacy feature because most data, just no one's looking at it, or people who don't need to look at it don't, because it's just not available to them. On top of that, customers have all these options for especially the driver facing camera. This is kind of more about finding the right balance between how kind of concerned drivers are about the privacy and how it's being addressed, and kind of getting the most out of the system. But there's a balance to be reached. One first step is just keep the camera completely off. You can have it be physically blocked. Then there's another the next step up from that would be that the camera provides these in-cab alerts. So it does that real-time kind of feedback, but it doesn't actually record video. So that was, I think, one of the early slides we were showing, that you can have those in-cab audio feedback, but it doesn't, you don't see it. You don't get, like in my case, where I was surprised that I created a distracted driving alert. When I saw it, I thought, oh yeah, actually I was, not looking at the road for a few seconds, and I need to do something about that. So you lose that kind of self accountability, but you also gain that no one's going to see your inward camera video. There's also this is different dimensions, but privacy mode, like when you're not driving the vehicle, the inward camera can turn off. People are concerned about their sleeper bunk, so there's a thing where we can just kind of blur everything except for the driver themselves. So you blur the passenger, you blur everything around outside of that's who's not the driver. And then there's also these different levels or types of coaching. So self-coaching is kind of what I just described, where I get to see my own video and I get to like reflect on it myself and improve. And so I'm the only human in that loop. And then there's managed coaching, which is more about having a safety manager and keeping people accountable and and also rewarding the best drivers and creating a whole culture of safety. So figure out where you want to be on that spectrum. And there's it's not exactly one long line. There's different dimensions there. Yeah, and then right, and then just kind of repetitive here. The video access is available on the app or the portal, and then here I'll just throw in this other detail where it's important to know that these systems can be wrong sometimes, the AI systems, and so we have an ability to contest any detected event. That has nothing to do with BIPA, but that is an important feature in other privacy laws, that the individuals get to say, hey, it was wrong in this case, and I want someone to review it. That is an important feature, and we've always had that baked into our system. All right, next slide. Then I'll go a little bit quicker on this next two slides, but we have these different transparency resources. So like Christy also mentioned, it's really a good idea just to provide notice, be transparent with the drivers about what is being collected. And we offer these template consent forms, the kind of notice/consent forms or waivers that you can use, and you can check those out with your own counsel and see if they work for you. And it's also valuable to put a notice at the location, at the point where the data is being collected, and that's this thing here on the right is a sticker that we make available to our customers so they can just kind of stick it on the inside the vehicle somewhere, and it just says very clearly what the system records and also what it doesn't record. And we kind of mentioned this whole talk, actually, the biometrics, the visual login part is off by default. And so that's true. And then actually other things that are potentially sensitive, like recording audio, that's off by default. Live streaming is also something where someone can kind of check in real time. It's particularly valuable after an accident if you want to kind of get back, eyes on the scene. That's valuable there, but it also, if it was misused, it's kind of a privacy issue there, problem. So by default, it's off. That's how we handle that one. So there's various things that are turned off by default, and it's nice to just tell drivers, these are the things that are on, or this is the recording, this is the data that's being collected. And then we also you can point, if you use our sticker, to this. We have on our privacy policy on our website, we have some information that's intended for drivers and passengers. So if they go to that URL, they can see what these a little bit more information about what these things are, and then their rights, and they can opt out of having data of them used as training data to improve the AI and things like that. So that kind of transparency is just generally a good practice overall, and we try to support our customers with that. So make use of them if from us or from your AI dashcam provider. There's only one more slide here. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, Christy, go ahead.
Yeah, so to summarize, basically It's hard because I hear a lot like, well, I don't even know if I should have a dash cam because, there's all these weird laws and blah, 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 right? And I would still argue that even as an attorney, they're reducing accidents. There's a lot of data there. So they do make a big impact on road safety. And that's all of our responsibility. So I'm still, bullish on our product and the fact that, that it can help everyone stay safe. Amidst that, there are these various privacy laws, and Illinois is probably the toughest. I think everyone realizes the toughest in the nation. But there is a way to meet those standards, and it's through sort of what Michael was talking about, this sort of approach that if you're kind of transparent with your drivers and just telling them, look, this is what we're doing, this is why, we're all, in this together, you can create this sort of win-win, which is, you can you can help keep them safer, keep others on the road safer, and still address driver concerns by being sort of transparent with them and, making sure their voices are heard and hopefully, avoid lawsuits as well. Because, we want to keep everyone safe, but nobody wants to get embroiled in a lawsuit, especially in Illinois right now. It's a mess. That's why we need people like Matt to help us out. So, there is a way to do this, right? And most of the other states, as far as I know, none of the other states have, anything like, what's going on in Illinois. But what I think one of Michael's points was that if you take sort of this holistic idea of, privacy, and you're involved and you're working with your drivers and you're being transparent and you're doing what you can, those, if you work with your drivers, those are the drivers that aren't going to sue, otherwise. Besides the fact that you have a consent that they signed, you're also sort of involving them in the process, which I think is always a good idea. So that's it. Next slide, I think that's it. So thanks very much for listening to us, and we're very happy we're available if anyone has questions about anything that we discussed. You're welcome to reach out to us. And Matt, do you want to close this out?
Sure, we have to close this out. Again, Christy and Michael, just thank you guys so much. Obviously, we had great response to this webinar. A lot of questions about BIPA in Illinois. Again, as your lobbyist, I can promise you this is our tier 1 fight. But in the meantime, please continue to work with great people like Netradyne, and we will continue to educate our members as well to protect yourself, because safety is ultimately our goal, and we don't want legal technicalities preventing us from safety. So Christy and Michael, thank you so much. What a great presentation. And their emails are on there. If you have follow-up questions, you're welcome to email them. My email's on there as well. You're certainly welcome to reach out to me. But Michael and Christy and Netradyne, thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. All right.